following discussion is not necessarily the views of all involved. The goal is to start open and honest discussion in the Christian worldview. Like all things, weigh what you hear with what you know and join us in our pursuit for the truth. Enjoy the podcast.
I'm going to defy God and then stay in his backyard.
And God's like, well, you didn't do very well last time, so I'm going to do it myself.
Because he goes into Egypt and just dumpsters their gods. Never get a man to do a god's job.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Second Rate Saints podcast as Joel is denting Josh's nice dinner table.
I got it for free. It's fun.
I'm not your producer today, but I am just talking about the introduction. But to my left is the actual person producing.
I'm the producer, Joel, this week. Are we co-producing now?
Yeah.
Can we make it official?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's awesome.
I'm not alone in my producing.
And to my left is a non-producer.
Wow, thanks. I'm Colton, and to my left...
I'm Josh. I am facility manager and research lead.
I guess I'm the only one with not a position now.
No, you're the
I'm
blog.
not, you're right, I'm not a position. You're not a producer, right?
We should start wearing name tags so we don't have to say it all the time.
Good point.
You're not wearing a name tag just for yourself right now?
No, I'm not. You're also a critic.
No.
Contrarian.
Contrarian. No, yes, sorry.
We gave you your job just like half an hour ago.
You're right, yeah.
So from now on, there will be a consistent blog post. Hopefully every 2 weeks. It can be ranged from anywhere from an audio sermon, like Josh's audio sermon and script is going to be going up shortly. Or you may have noticed Stuart is contributing, being a founding member of the podcast, although he is not here again.
Written papers, stories,
video critiques, critiques of videos, whatever. But
things that we think are worth seeing to some extent.
Yeah, so Colton's going to be heading that up. So, Blogman.
By the way, come check out our blog.
Yeah.
secondratesaints.com.
Yeah. Then I guess back around left is me. But
yes.
I didn't finish a book, so I didn't read anything. But Josh, what did you read this week?
Yes, I did some research recently. I got given a book a while ago called Growing Young by Powell, Mulder, and Griffin. Some researchers. The book is actually, I think it's the best church leadership book.
Oh, really?
I've seen. But that's because it doesn't talk about leadership. But it's what it talks about is like how do churches grow? How do they stop hemorrhaging? By hemorrhaging, I mean lose members.
Right.
And it's called Growing Young because the idea is you want to focus on essentially youth and young adults. And if you do that, it benefits all the other age demographics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because generally the idea is like if you prioritize youth and young adults, a lot of those young adults have young kids. Mm-hmm. The majority of the young kids in the church. So you're benefiting them. You're bringing a lot of young kids to the church. And their parents see the focus you have on their kids. So the older adults are benefiting from it. And by continuously focusing on young adults as time goes on, you are renewing your church as time goes on.
Right.
Not staying in this old identity that then gets old and out of time.
And by that you mean dies.
Yes.
Yep. And it's very hard to break from that.
Yeah. And the way they talk about it is there's six ways you do this, the way you grow young, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And it's the first one is unlocking keychain leadership. I'll go through each of these in a second. The next is empathize with today's young people, take Jesus' message seriously, fuel a warm community, prioritize young people and families everywhere, and be the best of neighbors. So the first one, unlocking keychain leadership, what they mean is you need leaders that give authority or not necessarily authority, but leadership aspects or leadership capabilities to young people and others in the church. So you the youth leader shouldn't be the one that's doing everything. They should be like, oh, this person's good at media, get them to do the media.
Right.
This person's good at sound for like the worship service, get that person to do it. Oh, this person's a gifted speaker, he can do half the speaking. I'll do the research and I'll show him how to write a sermon or whatever, but get him to do it.
Utilizing everybody's strengths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what you do is you end up giving the people a purpose, and so they want to participate.
Okay.
If people are just consuming, they'll start shopping.
Okay.
And they won't care
that's a good
about the
point.
Yeah,
church.
that's good.
And it also shows people that like the church actually cares about them and like actually believes what they say in the idea that like, oh, you're made in the image of God. You're capable of doing things. Like you have a part to play. You have a responsibility on this earth.
Yeah.
And then you also have empathizing with today's young people, meaning like you listen to them, to their struggles, to their pains, to their joys, and you walk alongside with them in that as older people or as leaders.
Okay.
So like whatever it is they're struggling with, don't diminish it, even if it's not the things that you struggled with or like your generation did.
Yeah.
But like
Well, and even one of those things.
Reaching people.
Correct me
with
if I'm.
right.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of the things, and maybe it's just because I've gotten slightly older, when I look back at my previous, like what rocked my world when I was 19, 18, even 21, in comparison to what I now see things, it's like, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal. Like that's that sucks, but that didn't rock my world.
Yeah.
But because that's the storm that they're experiencing, they haven't experienced the other storms.
Yeah.
To them, they might drown in that storm.
yeah, and the way a doctor put it is the worst pain you've experienced is the worst pain you've experienced.
Yeah.
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 Like full stop.
Yeah. And so for
Yeah.
young adults and teenagers, something that's like, okay, so you dated this girl for 6 months and now you're breaking up. This isn't like the biggest thing. But for them, it's like, oh my goodness, my whole future concept of myself is shattered.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
no kidding.
And if we only helped people when we thought they were at their absolute lowest they ever could be, we wouldn't help anybody at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like the age demographic is like 15 to like 29
Okay.
is the like, so like
Okay.
all of us here are still in this, like what the church should prioritize. And then you've got taking Jesus' message seriously. So like, don't water down the gospel in the attempt to make it accessible. Like actually like, present the truth, present the facts, be real, because today's youth, more than any other generation that they've noticed, can smell authenticity.
Yep.
And that's been what's driving a lot of like media, where they're just like, oh, that's real. That's why podcasts have been getting so huge, is because, and like real podcasts, not like fake stuff. That's why cable news is like shot down in like volume, especially with the younger demographics.
Okay.
Is because it's like they're just like, oh, this is fake. This isn't real.
Or even look at work when they try to appeal to a younger audience, like a younger workforce and stuff.
Yeah.
They don't go for the whole professionalism that used to be in the world even 20 years ago. Now it's now it's a lot of that. Yeah, being real, being able to know who your employer is and your employee is.
We're just one big family here at.
Yeah, exactly.
Wendy's.
It's like it's usually very transparent.
Yeah,
but
and it's just like, no,
try.
you're trying to say these words so that I work 14 hours for
Exactly.
minimum wage.
Yeah.
And it's
which is they can tell.
yeah.
Which I'm almost gonna do.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like what they really want is like, no, like if you're actually spreading Jesus' message and it checks out, then they're like, oh, this matters. And then the next one is fueling a warm community. And what they mean by that is like, this is the exact thing we were talking about with Wendy's, where it's like it's an actual family, not a fake one.
Yeah.
Where it's like
Like you said, authenticity.
yeah. And it's so like a place where one of the things they mentioned is like when they did their studies is it doesn't matter what kind of building you have. It doesn't matter how many people in the church. It doesn't matter the production value of worship. Those things are like in the list of like in like out of 20 all the things that people look for in a church, they're in like the bottom 10.
Yeah.
The not like number 3 is do I feel at home?
Brown carpets.
Yeah, it
Because
doesn't
churches
matter.
will split over that. Brown carpets is like 3.
Yeah, but like,
What?
we'll say that for one of our other segments. People, like, when they get down to it, like, people will complain about, like, their church or, like, they're not putting enough money into, like, the carpets, right?
Yeah.
But, like, when it comes down to it, people will meet with 10 people in some dude's backyard every Sunday if they feel like there's a community.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If they feel like they're at home, if they feel like they're actually experiencing the fellowship of Christ's
I
body.
think a lot of that is caused by the fact that social media is so big that they don't get these kinds of community a lot of places. So we should make the church, or at least parts of the church, like that.
Absolutely.
Be that community.
Absolutely. And then prioritizing young people and families everywhere. And what they mean, this seems like redundant because where it's like, oh, this whole thing's about prioritizing young people. What they mean is that, like, when you have, like, a church that's like, churches that prioritize young people will put their budget into young people. If they just say they're prioritizing young people because they give them, like, the young adults room in the basement and it's, like, moldy half the time,
I hate that.
right?
I'm so angry.
But they'll let them play cards down there.
Yeah.
Well,
Wait. They're playing cards down there?
It's
watching
rook,
movies.
It's rook cards.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're playing
cribbage.
Uno right
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, not even cribbage.
Oh,
That's got
got
SIM
gambling,
cards in
yeah.
it. Oh my goodness, I'm going on a tangent. Okay, so can I just jump in and see if I can tie together
Yeah.
two of those points? Because here's what I'm thinking about. We're supposed to appeal to the younger generation. Or I guess appeal to them, whatever that looks like, right? Go for things that they care about. Right now, social justice issues are huge. But how do we take the Word of God seriously in its entirety
Yeah.
and apply it to the social issues of today
Yeah.
when they lived in such a socially different world back
Yeah.
then?
This is a good question, and they handle that.
Yeah, I'm sure
Really?
it's covered. That's
Really?
why I'm,
And so that's in the be the best of neighbors, and that's like the next part. And so, like, with the prioritizing the young people everywhere, what they say is, like, put the budget into young adults and youth ministry, not just saying you're focusing on it, but, like, actually making it part of it. Put them in the worship service, put them in positions where they're, like, helping.
yeah.
Focus on, like, if you can sacrifice an old tradition, not a theological tradition, but like a church, just cultural thing for the new generation. One of the examples they give is, like, there's this one area where it was predominantly Hispanic, and it was all Spanish church services, but the third generation immigrants they didn't speak Spanish as well, like their children. So what they did was they changed half their services to English for their kids.
Yeah.
Right? More of their kids started showing up to church because before they couldn't understand half of what was being said.
Yeah.
And so, like, stuff like that, where it's just like prioritize for the people that the church is growing into, not the people that are going out. That's the easiest way I can say it. And then with the being the best of friends, to get to your point, is basically, like, do missional work. Kids these days care a lot, young adults care a lot about helping people, changing bad stuff into good stuff, social justice. How do you get that done with the taking the gospel seriously? Is you have the honest conversation.
Yeah.
What is the Bible saying about this issue in culture today?
Yeah.
And then deal with work in the social justice issue with that ethic.
Yeah.
okay.
So, like, kids care a lot about, like, rights today, right? And so it's like, okay, well, God cares a lot about people too.
Yeah.
And so, like, but you have to be authentic to the gospel message. And, like, if there's people coming into the church that are struggling with a lot of that stuff, one of the things that they suggest is, like, be open to people that are not there yet, accepting, and by presenting the gospel, but accepting them. If they don't want to be there, that's fine. But by being authentic, but dealing with the issues is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I think in our current culture, and this might just be a hot topic, but I think a great example of this, and this affects more in the States, where in Canada, so this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
With the overturning of Roe versus Wade, no matter how that goes one way or the other, and how we stand on that morally, is an opportunity for churches to go, oh, this is an ethical issue.
Yeah.
Okay. We need to pounce on the idea of helping widows, young mothers, single mothers.
Where does James say that true religion is?
Exactly. And so there's your biblical ethic. That's your foundation. And then you have your social justice problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you start actually living out the gospel in that in that area, in that mode, especially when there's such a focus on it culturally right now.
Yeah.
I think that would be, as far as I can tell, would be embodying what you're talking about there.
Especially since one of the things, like, with specifically this idea, is that one of the things that people criticize the church and stuff for is not helping these people when they're the ones who are primarily arguing for certain ways and whatever.
Or doing so poorly.
Or doing so very poorly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So trying to actually help and doing good stuff would just, I think a lot of people would see that as just a good thing.
Well, I think that would be would be the natural implementation of some of those chapters that you're talking about there, Josh.
Or you have a lot of problems with identity today.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so, like, well, what does the Bible say about what humans are? And then, but be loving and accepting of people who are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And being like, hey, like, you don't feel accepted in society because you are telling the world that you don't feel like you are who you are. Well, we care about people who are struggling with who they are, and we want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you need a family that is going to, like, be there for you regardless of the struggles you're going through.
Yeah.
We might not,
because your value is deeper than your identity.
Yeah. And we might not necessarily agree, but you know, like, we're gonna take care of you, and regardless of where you land, we're gonna help. Mm-hmm. And so, like, that's what they mean by, like, that's how you square those ideas of, like,
put effort in.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Actually, that does sound like a good book.
Yeah.
However, we're going to continue on with our topics.
Before we do you want to say what the title of the book was again and who wrote it?
Growing Young.
Growing Young by?
3 pastors, teachers / researchers. Powell, Mulder, and Griffin.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool.
Last week, we got Josh's comments on Mark and his what makes Mark unique and all that kind of stuff. We're going to move on to Matthew now with Joel. Mm-hmm. Taking the lead on that. Take it away.
Yeah, so I actually like that this is where we landed on the what have you read, because I think it ties in, like, weirdly with Matthew. And then that is you present the gospel in a way that is relevant to your culture. Yes. Right? And I think that's something that Matthew does very well, because he is the most Jewish of the Gospels, which, of course, the early Christians would have been largely Jews, right? First for the Jews, then for the Gentiles. That's what we're working with. So one thing I found when I was researching this week was the reason it's listed as the first Gospel is kind of arbitrary. But it's very, very early. So it's like a tradition that we just, like, set in, and for some reason it's just stuck as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, even though that doesn't indicate the chronology or even the topics, really. That was interesting. Sorry, Josh, were you going to say something? Because you sent me some notes on this as well, this specific thing.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, is it ordered Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Because I've never thought about this. It's like, I know it's synoptics and then John.
Yeah.
But, like, is it because, like, Matthew and Luke share with Mark, so Mark's in the middle?
It could be that. I mean, that's another thing, is that the gospel that shares the most with Matthew is, of course, Mark.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of different reasons for this. One of which would just be Mark was the first gospel. It's called Mark in Priority. We covered that last week in our episode on Mark. But it could also be that there was an earlier version of Matthew, possibly in Hebrew.
Aramaic.
Yeah.
I've heard both.
Yeah. It's actually both. But the one I found was Hebrew.
To me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and it might not even be just one copy of it, but it could be just a proto-Matthew that is bits and pieces passed through.
Sure.
Yeah.
A Q document.
Yeah, that's what's called the Q document. It's some German word, because I think we've already brought this up as well, because it has to do with Mark.
Kel.
But it shares the most information with Mark.
Yeah. There's also there's an idea, like they found Matthew was a tax collector.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like this idea that he may have, like, tax collectors in Galilee were known for taking copious amounts of notes of everything.
Right. So there's just a notebook out there.
My understanding is that the majority of the text that is shared between Matthew, Mark, and Luke, that would be this Q source, is the majority of Jesus' teachings, sayings, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It would not be out of this world for someone who's a data type, hoard collecting, writing down scribe to write down the sermons and notes and sayings of Jesus.
Yeah.
And that could have been Matthew's proto-gospel, which could be
sure.
Q or could not be.
Yeah.
Right.
Again,
Q
Q is almost always a collection. Like, there's nothing we can agree on that would be one document.
Yeah.
Right.
It could be Q, could be several things, but
Yeah.
And in case there's any conspiracy theorists listening to our podcast, this Q is not the same Q from the January 6th stuff happening in the U.S.
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows.
You went that way.
I don't know if I knew about that, to be honest with you, and I'm a conspiracy theorist. No, not exactly.
Just in case.
You're talking QAnon?
Yeah.
We were talking about Q and you went to QAnon.
I was avoiding saying
We're
it.
going to be
but
flagged on Spotify now. This is wonderful.
Exactly. That's why I
This is
tried not to
wonderful.
say it. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. No, the better and cooler Q.
So,
That's cool. Come on.
back to the topic. And we're back. So one thing that I was researching about Matthew was the date and authorship, which is something that I guess we're going to be talking about in the Gospels. It becomes less and less relevant depending on where you put Mark. But one thing Caleb brought up to me, which I didn't think was a thing, and then he's like, no, here's my source, and then he slapped a commentary in front of me, was that it actually might be after 70 AD.
Yes.
After the fall of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So that's like huge for dating the Gospels and even dating the Paul's letters as well, right?
Right.
Would be that it's after 70 AD, which is the destruction of Jerusalem, or the siege of Jerusalem, sorry. Because it wasn't completely destroyed, but it was in bad
pretty
shape.
close.
It was in bad shape, okay?
Yeah.
You can read up on that for sure.
Yeah.
And it's almost like his focus on Jewish literature or the rabbinic movement and his knowledge of it would indicate that it's actually after, which I didn't think was a thing before at all. And the reason they would think that is because rabbinic movement wasn't a huge thing during the life of Christ, but became a thing afterwards.
As far as I can tell, it's the way he approaches things. It's the questions that he answers. It's his emphasis on weirdly specific Jewish topics.
Yeah.
Right.
The confrontation with the Pharisees. The confrontation is slightly. The emphasis is put on more. So the Pharisees grew into the rabbinic Judaism movement, and it's the emphasis appears to be on those transitory points.
Okay.
And so now, as far as I could tell, as far as I was reading, was that's internal evidence. All internal evidence is normally categorized pretty weak when it comes to authorship and date.
Yeah.
But it's not nothing.
Yeah.
And particularly with Matthew's, it seems to be there's a lot of people that go, no, it can't be Matthew. Well, then who?
Right.
Somebody.
Yeah.
Well, it can't be before 70. Well, then when?
Yeah.
And so when there's a little shred of internal evidence, it's like, well, at least that's something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the actual, like you said, internal evidences is his deterring of hate for the Gentiles. Because likely the Jews wouldn't have super loved everyone outside of, when they had just been attacked.
Yeah. Not just attacked, that the people inside their capital, which was being sieged, were eating their children because they were being
horrifying. Some of the accounts that come out of the siege of Jerusalem.
Well, and they also destroyed the temple, the holy city of God.
Yeah.
God is no longer with his people.
Yeah. They stole God from them in their eyes. Yeah.
Which, if you view Matthew in this sense, it makes the Great Commission wild. Because it's a literal commanding of the diaspora. Right? Go out.
Okay.
It's... Anyways. It's
Neat.
crazy to me.
Yeah.
But it does show that there was an effort outside of just Paul to reach the Gentiles from a Jewish standpoint, which is super weird, and not something I thought about before really doing the research on it. Yeah, so that's kind of the fun facts in dating that I found. Any notes on that, you guys?
In terms of
thoughts on
authorship,
Matthew?
is it like you said? There's not super many other
Yeah.
people supported for it. Is there any specific standouts that some people think could have written it?
Not really. It's actually one of the most solid of authorships
Perfect.
out of the Gospels.
That makes it a lot easier.
Aside from maybe Luke. I'm not sure
Uh-oh.
about Luke. I haven't done the research on that, but I feel like
I
it's...
think that one's pretty strong.
I think
well.
these two, mainly because Matthew, it's tied to Matthew super early,
Yeah.
Okay.
and then there's no other proposed differences, and also the context. Again, this would be based off of internal evidence. References northern Israel, Palestine
Yeah.
region, at West Mediterranean,
Right.
which would be where we think Matthew was,
Yeah.
and so things just line up, and it was given
And
its authorship right away. So it's like,
Yeah.
why?
Specifically, the apostle, right? We're talking about the apostle specifically.
And
Is there another Matthew?
No, I just want to be clear.
no, there's Matthias.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which becomes an
Yeah.
apostle. So
Yeah, replacement.
yeah, Judas too.
Not replacement theology. Hold on.
No.
Wait a
Yeah,
second.
we're just going to keep like saying things we don't mean on the podcast.
No, the one thing I saw for the authorship though was like Matthew using Mark or this prototype as like the basis for his gospel, and then like adding on to it was not an uncommon practice for ancient historians, so to
Yeah.
speak. I sent you guys this, but it was like Xenophon, the Greek historian, did the same thing with one of him and this other historian. Both were eyewitness to these events while they were on like travels, and then the other guy wrote this document, which became the standard historical document. Right? Xenophon just took that, added a bunch of stuff onto it, and that became Xenophon's.
Yeah.
And now Xenophon's is the one that we have in his like in the books.
Okay.
And so it was like it's not uncommon because like paper and ink cost so much, and like if you both are writing the same thing, just
Well, it is one of the things that, like, even if it wasn't completely written by Matthew, it was probably transmitted by Matthew.
Yeah.
That he would have written stuff down and then passed it on, and that's how it became known as Matthew's Gospel.
yeah,
Okay, interesting.
yeah,
That's actually something I'm noticing as we're going through the Gospels. It's like, it doesn't matter as much who wrote them,
It's weird, eh?
which is
Yeah.
super weird because we have this thing about apostolic authorship, right? Where we have like a standard that's got to meet. And
Every-
they do technically meet them.
It does matter when you come into like canonization and how we
Oh, yeah.
canonize books, but outside of that context, I don't think anybody cares too much about who wrote it specifically.
I mean,
It matters with
I mean, I
letters.
care. I care.
The Gospels themselves, it matters less.
Sure.
Unless you start to make the eyewitness accounts argument from them. Although the eyewitness accounts can be argued just as well out of Paul when he's like that. And this many people saw Jesus alive, and as many of which are still alive. That in of itself kind of makes that point.
And from an apologetic standpoint, it also makes it more solid.
Yeah.
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 But really, actually, all the Gospels, it wouldn't matter. It would matter less about the authorship of the Gospels and more about date when it comes to apologetics. But yeah, no, it's weird, eh?
It's really interesting to see how that all plays together. Some of the themes in Matthew is the fulfillment of the prophecies by Christ. And one thing that's noted is more than fulfillment of prophecy, which is seen in the other Gospels. Since Matthew has such a heavy kind of history of Israel bent to his writing, it kind of becomes more like Jesus is fulfilling history, or he's fulfilling religion, right? He is the epitome of what has come before. And since he's ministering to this Jewish community, he's very much emphasizing these points, right? So his focus on fulfillment would be even his presentation of Christ as a new Moses in the birth account when he goes out to Egypt. He's warned by the angel, and then he's off to Egypt for a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
That's Moses.
I draw my son out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Eh.
And then it's like he focuses on that because he knows whatever Jewish reader is going to be like, oh, that's Moses.
Which is interesting because that ties Moses, but that also goes the whole my son out of Egypt, which then ties into the Messianic king stuff because God's son, the adopted son, is the king of Israel.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
Also,
what?
can I just point out the fact that he says, draw my son out of Egypt? Moses' name means to draw out.
Oh, that's a pun.
Yeah. I'm gonna Moshe Yeshua.
That's awesome.
But there's a lot of those, isn't there? Like there's
Moses'
there's-
whole life is a joke, is what you're saying, Joel?
No, puns aren't just jokes. They're fun.
I know.
aren't just jokes; they're fun.
I'm a theologian.
Second rate, of course.
Second rate saved.
Caleb, you were making a point.
I don't know. I found it interesting that Matthew. I wrote a paper on this long time ago. Can't even find it anymore. But how like Matthew. No, it was in year one. Probably not a good paper. Oh, okay. So it might be a good thing I couldn't find
It'll
it.
be on the blog tomorrow. Yeah.
But I found it interesting how many times Matthew just ties Old Testament themes over and over, and it almost kind of like braids them together as the gospel progresses.
Yeah.
It's super weird.
Well, what he's doing when he references these Old Testament, because he does the Egypt thing, draw him out of Egypt. He also does the wilderness wandering with the driving again. Driving out, would that be the same? No, probably not the same wording, but still, going out into the wilderness for 40 days, 40 nights, whole thing.
If that ties with them wandering around in the desert, is there also a tie with them and being exiled? This is happening right now. Ain't gonna lie.
For the desert, like
exiled
for Jesus' time in the desert.
Yeah.
No.
But he wasn't driven out, was he?
Well, the verbs actually. The verb is he is driven out or commanded out or thrown out or it's the Spirit.
No.
Puts him.
The crucifixion.
The crucifixion would be exile? No.
I'm
not there.
This is a new thought. We're gonna stop this.
This is
Think
called
about this.
It's called
typological theories.
The theology on the fly.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is all just typology, which is very relevant to Matthew, and you're just finding specific instances throughout all of Scripture, and then creating like a type, and then you see it through the Old Testament, and then boom, it's in the New Testament fulfillment, and that's a huge thing in Matthew.
right.
So he did the Egypt wilderness wandering, and then also the Son of Man, and also the Son of God. So Son of God could be like Israel are the children of God, so this is the Son of God, firstborn among many brothers. You'll see that in Paul later. But also his referencing to Daniel brings in this a whole new aspect, which is the what is it?
It brings in the kingdom stuff.
Yeah, it's the coming kingdom of Christ, and it's sort of so. Think about what happens in Daniel. They're delivered out of exile, sort of, right, by Cyrus, who is considered a Messiah, or the word Messiah is used for him like a savior, right? It wouldn't be that weird for us to use now, except we don't use Messiah for anything else now, so it gets weird. Like, I've brought this up with people who don't, haven't learned Hebrew, and they're like, oh, why is it the same word? I'm like, well, you use the same word for stuff. Right?
Yeah,
you could say savior. It's like, oh, man, you're absolute savior today. Yeah. And it's like, you don't mean
Jesus.
Ontologically, you're saving everybody.
in movies, there's always like a Messiah figure, or like
Neo.
like they'll actually refer to characters as a Messiah.
That's actually a good example of a type, really.
Yeah.
Like, anyways, it's a whole thing.
Superman.
But what he's doing here is he's setting up Christ as having the authority to change Jewish religion, which is super weird.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by that,
You don't
I'm
mean
going to give a
he's
specific example. I'm going to give a
dispensationalism.
specific example.
no,
not
that's
dispensational.
different.
Okay.
Him changing how we see the Sabbath with the Pharisees when they come up. So this is one of the instances where he is combating the Pharisees. Like you said, the rabbinic movement would have been combating some of the Pharisaical thought, the people that Jesus is talking to. Okay, so when he brings that up about David going into the temple and taking the bread, and it's fine to eat it on the Sabbath because you're the Lord's anointed, it's a whole thing. I don't think he would be able to do that if he didn't set up the precedent of Christ already being in command of this culture. of being able to.
Right.
It would be different, like he was trying to overthrow Judaism, but he's really not.
Yeah.
He's
kind
just
of like
shedding.
the prophets of old who could
Yeah.
command God's voice, kind of thing.
Well, maybe I can try to iron it.
Maybe I'm
iron
on
it out.
because this is one of the tangents I went on.
No.
I like found my information. I'm like, this seems like.
Well,
a good idea.
there is a thing here going on. At least I think so. Because Christ is set up not just as like prototypical Israel, though he is. He's not just set up as Israel's king, though he is, like king in that moment. He's not just set up as the king that's going to inherit the everlasting kingdom, the Son of Man in Daniel 7, though he is. He's also very much the prophet teacher.
Yeah.
That's having all of like the Sermon on the
Especially at the
Mount,
beginning,
all
right?
of the
Yeah.
like this is all of those themes coincide together. And what do you
Priest.
get?
Yeah.
What do you get when you have the teaching prophet with the authority of the king?
Or a priest and a king.
Yeah, I would go with the teacher prophet though.
Yeah.
Because
There's
priest,
both.
but teacher prophet gets into his sermons.
Yes,
Priests
sure.
don't do sermons.
Sure.
Jewish priests don't.
Yeah.
And so that's why that's emphasized differently.
Fair.
Sorry, but
No, it's good.
but what happens when you mix the teacher prophet with the authority of the king, mixed with that Danielic Son of Man figure that's selected out by God to reign forever? Well, you get this certain amount of authority that goes, oh, I am the leader of God's people. I am the one with that authority too, as Joel was saying. Yeah, we've been doing. You guys misinterpreted this Sabbath thing. You guys are off base here, and he also has the authority to institute the new covenant,
Right.
Okay.
which I think is where you were going with there, Joel. I don't know if I smoothed that out at all, but
Which this goes into like the old like one God said there will be one like Moses again.
Yep.
One who is leading the whole of Israel and also instituting covenant.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, with all that, because of Daniel 7 and King and Son of Man, because those are different but tied together in Jesus, you get kingdom stuff, like wild amount of kingdom of God stuff. I don't know enough about that as much as I in my studies I didn't cover that enough. What did you get in your studies there, Joel?
For the kingdom of God.
Yeah, in Matthew.
So I think again he is. I actually did have a note on this. So the Messianic Son of David, in the way that he's referred to, is pseudo-nationalistic.
I love it.
Right? Like it is claiming the kings of old. Like that's literally it.
sure.
We want to restore our kingdom. It's very nationalistic. It's all over the place. So Matthew doesn't actually have any hesitation calling Jesus the Messiah. That's fine. The kingdom of God, as presented by Matthew, is a presentation than a paradox. Right? So
Okay.
it's a leading up to the establishment of his kingdom. And much like him claiming all these very Jewish isms to Jesus' character, that he is Moses, and then he's all this imagery that we would know, these types that we would know.
Right.
He's building up Christ as a Messiah, like Cyrus the Great, who's about to deliver all of the people out of exile. And then in a twist, he dies. That's the big twist in Matthew.
Yeah.
Right? So I think
Well,
what
it's
he's
the
doing,
first gospel,
he's
so-
doing a bait and
Yeah.
switch here. He's building up to this is what you would expect from the kingdom of God, but no, the kingdom of God is not death for the cause of victory, but the death of one man for the victory of all, kind of a thing, right? So again, I think it's a bait and switch scenario.
Which I guess if you're paying
Okay.
attention to all the metaphors and the teachings and all the stories and preaching of Christ, you should expect that there's going to be a switch. There's going to be a weird
Right. It's not going to be
reversal.
It's not going to be the bog standard. Christ then destroys Rome and conquers all of it.
Yeah.
And then does that also play into the Great Commission?
100%.
Like
Yeah.
how yes, it's a nationalistic kingdom, but the nationalistic kingdom is world encompassing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even the vassal idea. Okay, so when we're back in Deuteronomy and it's considered a Hittite treaty, this is a super niche thing that probably a lot of people haven't heard of or haven't thought about or don't care about. But I'm going to talk about it anyways because it's something I love. And it's the thought of earth being a vassal state of heaven. Right?
Yes.
And in Deuteronomy, there's the Ten Commandments that are brought down from the mountain. And then one copy is kept for the people and one is kept for God. But both are in the Ark of the Covenant. It's the whole thing. This is symbolizing Israelites or Israel's status as a vassal state of heaven. So what a vassal state is there's a larger kingdom that has control or you have to swear allegiance to. It's a whole thing. It's a way to conquer without killing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what's happening on earth when Christ comes. And once again, it is God on heaven and God in heaven and God on earth, right?
Which also ties back to Cyrus because he used suzerain vassal treaties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
vassal
Yeah,
treaties
yeah.
were a thing
Yeah.
used all throughout the Old
Yeah.
Testament and into the New Testament.
The here and not yet idea of the kingdom be tied in with that moment of Jesus' death. Like this idea that it's building up to a conquest of some kind, then he dies, so it's not physical, but then him coming back is showing that, yes, it's already been, like we've talked about the here and not yet in other ones. I think it was salvation?
Sanctification.
Sanctification.
Yeah.
We talked about it. And because the kingdom is here, but also isn't here yet, is Jesus' death supposed to, like, at least in the way that Matthew shows it, is it supposed to show that Jesus'
Okay.
death both brings...
Sure, that
both
might be the
cuts
Davidic.
off the whole idea of a physical coming, but shows that that his resurrection shows that it is still here? Like, that's the catalyst...
Maybe. If you look at, like, the Davidic covenant of you will have a son on the throne forever and ever,
Okay.
and that's what the messianic prophecies are trying to do there.
I'm wording this very
No, I'm trying to kind of... I feel like we've just gone into generic Old Testament typology.
Sure.
Sorry
that is
about
Matthew's.
That is my... Yeah,
Well,
that
yeah,
is my
that's-
favorite
yeah.
thing, but whatever. So if you say it's the kingdom is here and not yet, you could say David was on the throne, but he was not yet there eternally.
Ooh,
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah, basically,
So,
let me
yes, Israel is the kingdom is...
Yeah.
It's the children of God on earth, right? But then there's the Son of God, which instates the kingdom of God.
Sure. Well, let me say it this way. Does the, in your research from what you've seen, I don't know, does the death and resurrection of Christ, because of all this typology stuff, is that specific part reference, bring in any typology of the kingdom to show a different type of kingdom? That's specific his death and resurrection in that moment. Does that have anything to do with this here and not yet in terms of a kingdom?
Well,
So you're asking about what is the atonement theology of Matthew? No.
No,
I'm
what
misunderstanding.
What typology is represented in the death and resurrection?
can I try?
Yeah, go
Sure.
for it.
Yep.
I think Matthew is referencing the idea of how Christ becomes king, like
Right.
fully. There's like his whole thing before Pilate, as with the Gospels, but highlighted in Matthew is that whole like, "Are you king of the Jews? So you have said." And there's all this talk, not just in the sign above him, which is very important in Matthew. It's his enthronement.
Right.
It's his. This is the what's it called when a king becomes
Coronation.
Yeah. And the crowds are, he said he's king of the Jews. But actually, the last time kingdom's mentioned in the biblical text is at the at communion, when the Lord's Supper, at the Last Supper.
Oh, okay.
And then it's not mentioned, but it's talked as though it is. Like you end up with, "Hey, go throughout the world. All authority on heaven and earth has been given to me."
Right.
The implication is because I died and have come back.
Okay.
Because he is enthroned, he is king, he is in control, and he will be with us until the end of the age. And I think that's the thing that Matthew's emphasizing with his death and resurrection.
To add on to that, because that's interesting, and I understand. But the is there, because of typologies that he's building up Jesus as the prophet, then the priest, then pseudo king, pseudo god, whatever, son of man, all that, and then it's, if it was playing out like, say, a movie or a a script. The plot is moving forward. It's showing that Christ is going to be king. All of this building up to it, but then he dies. Is that death and resurrection supposed to show that this idea of this building up is completely different from how it was supposed to, where it was before building up a physical kingdom, but then it shows like, wow, look at it's not. Although hinted at before.
Well, I think his sermons, his depiction of, hey, this is the kingdom, but it's not like that.
Okay.
The kingdom is like, and then he gives an odd analogy that everybody's like, what is he talking about? Right? Like the kingdom's like a tree, or the kingdom's like and his Sermon on the Mount is not what a almost general is going to start saying.
Right.
His entire buildup of the kingdom is weird, right? And you have the whole people, you have the 5,000, they're like, hey, let's make him a king. And he's like, no, backing out of there. And so you do have this idea, you do have, I think, what you're getting at there, you do have that there's this expectation, this like generic expectation of, oh, if he's king, he'll take it by force.
Messianism.
Yeah, because that's what you would do if you have that nationalistic hope from Daniel, and you have the idea of David in your mind. What do? Well, you storm Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Right.
But he storms Jerusalem on a donkey on Palm Sunday, and all of his teachings are about self-sacrifice, and he has authority to do so, and he has the authority to reinterpret the Sabbath, and like you have like the let's say the disharmony between the expected Messiah and the Messiah that's depicted in Christ as dying and raising. The disharmony there begins right from chapter 1.
Yeah.
It's not just all of a sudden, bam, it's there when he dies. It's like there's this growing tension of this is what we expect, but this is not what he's presenting. Yeah. And then it just grows wider.
A subversion of what a Messiah would be.
Can I use a Jewish image to present this? Like, to present
Absolutely.
this idea? There's the idea throughout the Old Testament that the temple is a physical symbol of what it is in reality above. What the temple of heaven, or the heavenly reality of God.
As below, so above.
As above, so below.
Whatever.
Yeah. As below, so above is the alchemists. Yeah. So as above, so below. The idea that the God gives them a physical image for what it is in the heavenly reality, the truer reality. So like the way the temple is organized, or the way Eden is organized, or the way Jesus in the intermediary story with Jairus' daughter is like organized with the people, is all images of how like God's presence and his people and the world is organized. And you've got this idea of as above, so below. I think what Matthew is doing is he's using that idea and showing us that all of the old ideas about the Messiah, king, prophet, kingdom ideas were physical images like the temple of the heavenly reality that would be real, that is in Jesus. That this Jesus is the heavenly reality of this earthly image that has been given to them for the last 1,500 years. And
what
tying
specific image are we talking about now?
all of them.
All of them,
So
okay.
the prophet, the king, the mix, the Son of Man, the kingdom of God, at Israel as a whole, are all the physical instantiations of this heavenly reality that is now intermingling with the physical.
Yeah, and when that takes place in actual time, there's a snap that has to happen between expectation and the reality.
Yeah.
Right.
They start seeing the heavenly reality and they can't make sense of it because of this. Well, they're seeing bits and pieces of it in the heavenly reality, and it's because the heavenly reality is the reason we have the physical symbols is because the heavenly reality is not entirely comprehensible. And so Matthew, what he's doing is he's merging those ideas because Jesus has been presenting them to his followers.
Right. Yeah.
And then the crucifixion and the resurrection is when it happens.
Yes.
And then from that point on, the heavenly reality starts taking place.
Well, that would explain the tearing of the curtain.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that would explain the tearing of the curtain. That would explain why Jesus is saying, okay, now this physical kingdom is going to go out into the world.
Okay. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Did that kind of answer your question there, Colton?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'm going to ask a little bit different, but another theme that I assumed was more prevalent. However, in my studyings, it didn't pop up, obviously to me. Did you guys get anything with Isaiah suffering servant? Like, obviously that's there.
Yes.
But is it is Matthew making explicit claims to it, or is he just obviously being affected by the message, like the history of it, the cultural understanding of it? But Matthew oftentimes will write as is written, right? Like, so the fulfillment of that kind of stuff. I didn't find a place where he did that with Isaiah's suffering servant, although obviously it's still in there typologically, whether intentionally or not. Did you guys find anything about?
I did not.
I didn't either. And I thought that was interesting.
I think if you're going to find it anywhere, it's going to be Matthew, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more of a... Sorry.
There's definitely stuff there. I mean, you'll find it closer to like Passion Week and stuff.
Yeah. It's just not intentional. It's not explicitly in the text.
No, but there's images that would... It would almost be like... So Isaiah, right, is alluding to the Psalms, and then the Psalms that he's alluding to are then implied in Christ's life.
Yeah, well, it's...
Right?
It's,
like
it's,
the stone the builder rejected.
The Bible
Right?
is actually making its own typology there.
It's hyperlinked, dude. It's all over the place. Like, you click on one, you're going to 1,000. It's awesome.
But it's I just found it interesting that it's not one of those explicit themes that Matthew's dealing with. Although clearly it is influenced in his writings, and you're not just justified in doing it, but if you're writing typological patterns within Matthew, it's there.
It's like you couldn't avoid it.
Yeah.
Because if it's true, it's going to be there.
Well, if that's the events that happened, then
yeah. Well, no, it's just like if you're anyways, that's another wild idea. If something's true, you're going to hit on true things, or if something's beautiful, it's going to hit truth. And so why a lot of profound truths even outside of the Bible touch on things the Bible talks about, and it's because all these things, if they actually are true, are going to
I see what you mean. Okay.
hit on the same things, and you can't avoid it.
Right.
And because we're geared all generally to find
what is
we have the value hierarchy oriented similarly towards each other.
Yep.
So
what about I think we're gonna go. Do you have more points there, Joel? Actually,
That's most of what I did.
Okay.
You know, I wish I could have gotten more into the meat and potatoes text of it, right? Just like go right through. Unfortunately, didn't have time to do that this week, so we'll cover it again, I'm sure.
To lightly cover, when I was, because in school, when I was first taught about things like structuring and themes and stuff of Matthew, is it this gospel that was emphasized that has kind of like 4 structural areas that people give it? Generally, is if I remember, the first being Jesus as the prophet teacher, as you like to say, then more of a priest role than as a king role than as the Messiah role, as he's emphasized more of. That's what I've heard, but
I mean, I can see how that's overlaid. I mean, we do get a lot of post crucifixion in Matthew. Like, I think the most actually. No,
that or Luke.
Yeah. No?
John might be up there.
Really?
I'd have to see.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
I'd have to see.
I shouldn't be just quoting facts that might not exist.
I've always heard that as a thing that goes over all the Gospels when they're talking about more like the harmony of the Gospels. I haven't heard that applied specifically to Matthew, not to my recollection.
I feel like I've heard that said specifically about Matthew more so than the others, whereas the others have more of their own physical structures that, like we talked about with Mark, is it has its very own specific structure, but Matthew having the structure of building him towards that Messiah rather than explicit right at the beginning.
I guess, and maybe it's
Unlike
just
John.
because I have more of a narrow view. It's just I don't understand the priestly analogy at all in Matthew. I see it in John. I can see it in Luke. I don't get any of that in Matthew, unless you're talking about like he can lead us into presence with the Father, into God's very presence, and that's there. But that's all like that comes to mind.
Yeah, fair enough.
I could just have too narrow of a view.
Prophet and priest, some people use very similarly, although there is a difference.
But Jews would make a
difference.
massive difference.
Yeah.
Jews would say those things are so not. No,
it's so. This is a complete tangent, but it's about prophets and priests. It's like there's two, from an outsider who's not Jewish, it's like there's two priesthoods. There's one that does all the things for like the religion, and then there's another guy that gets to talk to God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's the one guy that talks to God, and then there's the other guy that talks on the behalf of God. Like,
Right.
like
That is funny. It is
like
funny.
you know, and
Compared
it's
to how we
and-
see it today. Yeah.
and the one gets to talk shit about the other.
Yeah. They're just rebuking each other.
Well,
Yeah.
that's not uncommon in Jewish history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of what the minor prophets are, right?
Yeah.
It's like freelance priests. Which is fun.
I got
Man.
But
snort
so there was something then, because we've talked about Matthew and Mark. One thing that Matthew and Mark have that I don't think. Josh looks really excited.
I was just gonna say what I like about Matthew is what I saw a difference here was it seems like whereas Mark focused on the kingdom, Matthew's focusing on the king.
Yes.
Like,
But I think that has more to do with him
Yeah.
needing to be a descendant of David.
yes,
Right? So they didn't really care what kind of kingdom they were getting. They just wanted one back.
Yeah, but that's what I mean is like they like it's focusing on the like the individual who's leading the kingdom.
Yeah.
Whereas Mark is focusing on the kingdom, like because of that like very Romanesque Latin competition that's going on in Mark. Yeah. Whereas in Matthew, it's like, hey, our guy's here, guys, get excited.
It's kind of awesome if you see this as the end of exile in the OT, right? Because well, what they're doing is once again they're like, we want a king again, and God's like, well, you didn't do very well last time, so I'm gonna do it myself.
That's interesting.
Never get a man to do a God's job.
I feel like that's from like the new Thor movie or something.
There is something that Matthew and Mark share in common.
Yeah.
That's not in the other two gospels. And this is, I guess we're going a little off.
The letter M.
This is our theory section where we're saying unbased things that might be true.
No. I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on
It's not the letter M.
the
Oh my god.
one of the one of the sayings of Christ as he's dying on the cross is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Both of them record the Aramaic beforehand as well.
Can you say it in Aramaic? Because I cannot.
Eli, lama sabachthani.
Oh, that was pretty good.
That was good.
Yeah.
We didn't even.
Someone's going to say, Caleb, that's not how you pronounce it, but that's fine.
Caleb, that's not how you pronounce it.
I think you got Eli right.
I think so.
Yeah.
Let's hope so.
But what do you guys think of the significance of that? The other two gospels don't have that. It's interesting. Do you think there's anything in that? Do you think why only recorded in Matthew and Mark? Or is it just one of those things where it's just one of those details that Matthew and Mark share that, Luke was like, I'm running out of page and ink, guys, and things are expensive, which is absolutely fair with Luke because it looks to be the standard size of scroll length.
Right. And with Luke, does it fit in with the theme that he's trying to present at that point?
Well, both of them present,
Yep.
I think both of them present a kingdom which is brought through by suffering, and the other one shows a king which is enthroned by suffering. And I find that interesting, and that's what both of those statements.
Yeah.
I don't know. What
I was
do you
thinking,
guys
is
think?
it because Luke is all about like Jesus is coming to fix everything, and then so it would be putting him on a bad note if he started off with him also being screwed over by God.
I feel like
this guy's not going to get anything done.
So you're saying he just didn't. Well, I don't get it. I'm confused. I thought I understood, and now I just
Doesn't help his theme, is what he's saying.
Okay, so you're
if this guy's like, hey, he's going to fix all the problems between man and God, and then it's just like, oh, this guy also is getting.
Yeah.
God's like, I forsake you.
Here's the thing.
like if you were to
Yeah.
go ahead.
But for the Jews, that would have been like, oh yeah, fair enough.
This is why we can't have good things.
I mean, I
my
know this
goodness.
is me reading into it, and it's me trying to think like a first
Yeah.
century Jew, which I'm not very good at doing.
We are second rate.
But we are second rate for a reason, and we'll continue to be for quite a
It's
while.
a great defense. We're going to use it all the time.
Absolutely. Our defenses were not very good at this. Could it have been that it was a better representation of the community to include that Christ also felt forsaken, like the Jews did? That seems like the serious answer.
That's probably.
And
Right.
I mean, it is obviously
that's
a
too
reference.
simple. I like it too much.
It is obviously a reference to Psalm. Hold on,
22, I believe.
Psalm 22.
Yeah. I'm on it.
Man. He's quick fire.
23 is Gangster's Paradise, just so everybody knows.
What? Sorry.
Even though I walk
20
through the valley of the shadow of death. We didn't even rehearse that.
You're
guys.
right. It's Psalm 22.
Yeah.
There is that going on there. It makes a lot of sense that Matthew would do it because he's all about like, hey, this is Old Testament and the New. Here we go. Boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom.
Also, he's like it's also another reference back to David.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense. Mark's just like get facts and get out of here. And
Yeah.
anyway, what are you gonna do about it?
This guy's
Yeah.
winning. Are you going to be on his side?
Mark is like an army recruitment video. And Matthew's like a history class.
You could cheer for the Ottawa Senators or the Toronto Maple Leafs. You know who to pick.
Yeah.
Pick the Lord.
Neither.
Anyways, this is our incoherent advertising for Christ.
This is the part where we transition so poorly that we lose it all.
Christ is a Senators fan. That's the point.
Okay, let's try and summarize Matthew real quick before we head on to the next
Please.
segment.
Summarize.
Okay, so Matthew is all about ministering to a Jewish community. This was a big deal because Paul was going to the Gentiles, and he said, you know what, that's a good idea, we should go to the Gentiles. And then Matthew wrote a whole bunch of things about the Old Testament, so he's like, hey guys, this is still relevant for you should really pay attention to this, and it's not just the Gentiles that have to deal with it. In fact, just because they trashed our house doesn't mean we have to be angry at them. And then he writes about that. And ultimately, it's about Christ's kingdom's coming, and it's about David being on the throne forever, and God fulfilling his promises that he made in the Old Testament to this Jewish community, to the sons of God, and continuing on forever and ever, because Christ is king.
They have a king again.
Currently reigning.
They have a king again, and now it's perfect.
Yes.
And it will be perfect. But it's
Doesn't
not
look
quite
like
perfect
what
yet,
you
but it
think
will be.
should, but
Yeah. You won't believe what happens next. Okay, for the next section.
So we've done Mark.
Yes.
Josh did Mark. Joel did Matthew.
Yep.
Just now. Next week we're getting
Luke by me.
Luke by Colton.
Yep.
And I'm very much looking forward to that. But before
too.
we end this, we do have a segment, and we're actually going to do a newer segment. Joel, you had a nice name for this one,
Yeah, so we're calling this one Reddit in the Bible.
which is really bad. It's not going to be limited to Reddit. All
This
we're
is our-
doing
okay.
is... Oh, you,
Can I just say something
Yeah.
before we start? This is our placeholder for when you guys start leaving comments for us. Okay, continue.
that's a fair statement. All it is questions about either biblical history, biblical studies, theology, questions off the internet. And so either from biblical academia, Ask a Biblical Scholar, some random Facebook post, I guess. I hope I don't have to scour Facebook for them.
Oh, please.
Yeah, or
Tumblr posts.
questions on previous videos, or if someone emails in a question, whatever. Seeing how we're still... Joel just talked about, Judaism and how they looked at God and how they saw Christ, right? We're gonna keep with that theme. So the question actually was from r/academic biblical, but the question is: did ancient Hebrews recognize gods from other nations as actual gods, almost equal to Yahweh?
So,
It's an internet question. It's got one sentence. I got no clarification for you.
yeah.
yeah. Well,
What's the word for this, Josh?
henotheism.
Okay, I couldn't remember
Ding,
it.
ding, ding. He's right.
Yes. It's similar to polytheism, where in polytheism you have a pantheon of gods and you believe in all of them, usually with a hierarchy, which was common in Babylon, Egypt, Canaan, the other Semitic places, and Greece.
Think of the
Rome.
stereotypical Greek mythology kind of idea.
Yeah.
Except they worshipped all of them.
Yes.
Yes. And
Oh, I'm talking-
in
yeah, polytheism.
henotheism, it's the idea that there are many gods, but your country generally follows one, or your city-state.
Yeah. I think a lot of the Hindu religions, the old Hindu religions, right?
No.
Or Indic religions, I should say.
Well, it's like, for example, is like Babylon was the city of Marduk, the
Yeah.
Babylonian god Marduk. And if you controlled that city, the idea was that you had power over the entire kingdom of Babylon, Sumer, Persia, all that stuff, because Marduk was the chief god. And so if you got Babylon, it meant that the chief god was on your side.
Okay.
Or if you controlled the city of Uruk, the god Naru-Sin was on your side.
Yeah.
Or Naru-Sin, if you lost, defeated you, your god.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things with this that I've found, and I found this, I don't have my source for this, so this is just, I guess, apparently from Caleb's memory, but this is Caleb's memory. One of the things that you'll see some ancient Israelites would do is they would carry dirt from ancient prophets.
Yeah.
They would carry dirt from Israel to wherever they were going to prophesy.
Yeah.
Normally that meant, outside of the traditional bounds of Judaism at the max that they got to under Solomon.
Right.
Because they believed that they had to bring their God with them. And that's one of the reasons why you see cities are so important. The actual geographical location is where that God resides, in some sort of spiritual realm or some sort of temple.
Right.
But that is his sphere of influence. He might have more, but that's his.
And there is precedent for it in the Bible where he says, "This is my city, Jerusalem, where I reside."
Yes, but that when interpreted within henotheism, that's what it becomes.
Yes.
And I think that, and I at least saw this in Jonah, is it's relevant that Jonah, when he doesn't follow through God's commissioning, he doesn't just stay around in Israel. Because, I'm going to defy God and then stay in his backyard. No. I'm going to go as far as I can away. Maybe Spain. Because that might be where he was headed. And it's important that he doesn't just hang around in Israel. Because it's possible.
Because that's where God rules and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's possible that even Jonah himself was a little henotheistic. It's been argued, as far as I can tell, that Abraham, as the man, was henotheistic. It was like, hey, yeah, you got all your ancestors' gods, blah, 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 whatever. And then one God's like, hey, you, buddy, follow me specifically. And he's, okay.
Yeah.
And this appears to be a thing that Israel flirted with throughout all of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And because it's an error, obviously, but it's an error so close to polytheism, it's one of the problems. It's one of the reasons why they fell into Canaanite religion so easily.
Yeah.
And why, with the return from Babylon, there was this massive emphasis on no, other gods aren't just like not important or lesser, they don't exist.
Well, something I was going to say about that is, you guys know more about this than I do because you've learned about it specifically. But in Daniel, when Daniel refers to, it's not Matthew, Michael, the archangel Michael going to Persia to fight off the archdemon that resides there.
I was held up for a few days from the Prince of Persia. Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the game. Yeah.
Sands of Time.
Yeah, that's a good one. But when he, in that is, I've heard it said, I don't know how true it is, that it's kind of this fighting a little bit of this idea that there are actual gods in Persia, but they're actually demons who are below God kind of idea.
Well,
And
Paul would actually second that.
also, the Pentateuch would. The God says as
you're
much
right,
in
yes.
Deuteronomy when he's with the Balaam scenario.
Yeah.
He says that the gods
Right.
that they worship are demons. Like, just straight up.
Okay.
Now that
And-
makes a lot of sense for a Christian idea of angelology.
Yeah.
For a ancient Jewish, let's say, spiritual being framework, who knows what actually existed there? But to be honest with you, because how much has been adapted from Canaanite and Egyptian, and so when God calls them demons.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, these are angels that turn bad that are lesser beings than God.
Right.
Okay, they immediately, oh yeah, no, when an ancient Israelite read that, he went, oh, I understand now. It's more likely that is, oh, these are evil spiritual beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, if the Jewish minds of the time were reading Enoch, they would have a totally different view of what demons are.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I think that might be the first conversation I ever had with Josh, which is a weird throwback. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's also like this general idea that there's like how do you put it? Yeah. There is a Jewish presented idea that there are, like, they were the stars in the sky that fell. That these stars in the sky became the gods of other religions and started tearing people away from God. Which is similar to the Enoch idea of the Nephilim, but anyways. Yeah.
Nephilim. We're having a whole podcast on it. We might.
In the future.
I'm going to. And if I have to make a podcast for myself, I'll do it.
No, it'll just be me and Joel when the other people can't make it.
You know what? Write a document. I'll put it on the blog someday.
The Josh and Joel special. We're just talking about demons this one.
So this is cool. So you've got this henotheistic idea of, like, do they think this? Have they fallen into this? Generally, at times they probably have. Why they fell into the polytheism, like you were presenting, the syncretism, why they started worshiping other gods in high places and stuff like that. But you've also got the idea that God himself is not a henotheist.
No,
No.
that's not Christianity. No.
Well, which of the minor prophets is it that he's just like, hey, who can tell the future?
Yeah.
Not you.
Well, you've
Yeah.
got this the biblical arc is God pulling them away from that idea, kind of, because he goes into Egypt and just dumpsters their gods.
At their own game.
Yep.
I mean,
Right?
all of the plagues are just him dunking on Egyptian gods.
Yeah. Well,
Awesome.
and it's just like, oh, you have no power here. I'm in your land. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Right? And then he pulls them across multiple countries. He pulls Abraham across multiple countries.
Yep.
Right? And then you've got this idea that God says, I fill the earth.
Well, how about you also have the ark that's taken by the Philistines? They put him beside their god Dagon, and he just falls over, handbrakes.
Yeah.
Well, a couple times, and they're just like, what?
Falls over prostrate before the ark.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about 1 Samuel 5, if that's what we're going to do. Because it's literally the ark being lost,
Yeah.
and then they don't even go and get it.
No,
God brings it back because he's powerful enough to defeat the gods by himself.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the Israelites.
It's actually a good point.
Here's
Yeah.
one of the
Good
most
point.
baller moves.
Okay,
from God.
Samuel 5 is literally just Tales of the Traveling Box. It's awesome.
When it comes back to the Israelites, they don't take care of it properly. They're just like, oh, you're not much better than them. He touches the box, boom, dead.
Yeah.
Dead.
They
No, they're terrified.
Yeah.
Like, they're just like, how did it get back here? It's like,
Indiana
what's
Jones.
going on?
Indiana Jones should have been a totally different movie.
Oh, it'd been so cool.
It should have been
Samuel
everyone
5,
in fear in boils dying on a hill.
No, actually, I think that's what
love that
happened.
movie.
at
Oh, is
the
it?
end.
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen Indiana Jones?
The book was better.
There's no way you read the book.
No, that's
Oh, I
what
know
happens.
what we're watching.
Yeah, we're gonna watch it.
Okay,
later.
no, that's what happens. The Nazis steal the Ark of the Covenant,
They do.
and then Indiana Jones can't get it back, so they open it. All the spirits inside kill all the Nazis,
Oh.
and then just the Ark's just waiting there for Indiana to pick it up.
Well, don't forget that because they close their eyes, they don't die.
Spoiler alert.
That's kind of actually exactly what happens to first.
Yeah,
to Samuel.
but not just that. He does it to 5 different cities, like the 5 major cities of the Philistines.
Yep.
Have I told the Samuel pun on this podcast
Oh,
yet?
no.
Or was that one
Yes,
of
you
the other
have.
ones?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, like if you follow where the Ark, because the first city takes it.
Yeah.
He dunks on Dagon.
Yeah.
And then they're just like, get this away from us. They drop it over to their neighbor city. They're like, this thing's cursed.
It goes to 3 cities.
Right?
It's
yeah.
crazy.
And then that city starts getting tumors and like
Yeah.
rats and the plague. And they're just like, this thing sucks. Drop it over on the other city. Right?
Yeah.
And then they're just like, they just put it on. The third city's just like, oh, this isn't worth it.
Yeah.
They just put it on a cart, load it back to Israel without a driver.
Yep.
Because they're just like,
Just like
this thing's
donkey
going to
take
get
it, yeah.
itself back. And it just the cows just walk themselves back to Israel.
Yep.
And then Eli dies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then God's like, hey, stop messing around because I'm not.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
Whoa. Okay.
And that's in the middle of them asking for a king to protect them.
Well,
Like, all
it's-
the other guys have kings. He goes, you got a box,
Well, no,
dude."
because they bring it out thinking that if they bring out the box, they're going to win the battle because they can get God to fight for them.
Yeah.
And God's like, no, I'm fighting for you.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't tell me what to do. I'm blessing you.
Well, in the
Yeah.
ancient world, it was famous that the Ark of the Covenant was good luck for the Israelites.
Yeah.
It was like their God was defeating everybody. And,
Yeah.
And then when they got it, they were like, we have the ultimate weapon. It's like,
Yeah.
no, dude.
And he's like, no. That box is powerful
Literally
because
the
of
plot of
me.
Indiana Jones,
Not
Yeah.
like I'm not powerful you're not powerful because of the box.
Yeah.
And it's the same method with like the temple, where he's like, Solomon's like, yeah, I've done this great thing, and God's like, yeah, it doesn't matter how many hundreds of thousands of animals you sacrifice for this temple. It's only
Yeah.
special because I'm in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's only gonna happen if you're obedient.
Yeah. Which is the end part of it, is just reiterating.
Let's bring this back to the question. Did
Yeah.
ancient Hebrews recognize other gods from other nations as actual gods, almost equal with Yahweh?
The almost equal, probably, but they shouldn't have.
The bad Jew would.
No, it's no other God before
for
me.
me. Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think that if they were truly an Orthodox ancient Jew or a Orthodox Israelite, they wouldn't put him on the same level as Yahweh.
If
No.
if they
They would have
were
no reason.
obedient,
They should not
But the
at all.
story of the Old Testament is that they were not.
Yeah.
It's from what I've heard, it's the average layman Hebrew probably did. He probably did subscribe to henotheism.
Right.
Moses, some of the high priests, some of the kings, the more, let's say, devout or learned,
Yeah.
may not.
Yeah. It's like how medieval peasants thought that schizophrenia was a sign of being not demon possessed, but like being cursed by God and stuff. It's like they're wrong, but they're not so wrong that it's
not functional.
It's a progression in understanding
Yeah.
God and
Yeah.
understanding the Bible. Right?
It's
Am I right on that?
not entirely clear either how many characters in the Old Testament subscribe to henotheism and how many subscribe to
Pure
monotheism.
monotheism.
Yeah, because it's a lot of times when the vocabulary is our God is better than your God.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that I believe that your God is an actual deity. All that
Yeah.
I'm saying is, hey,
What you call
Yahweh's
a God
better.
sucks.
Well, not yeah, and in, like in this grand way, and back to the point that I was making about how like God's not a henotheist is like he says like no, yes, I'm in this city, but I'm also throughout the entire world.
Yeah.
He has influence everywhere in the stories. He also claims to have made everything. None of the other gods claim to have made everything. They create a part of it.
okay,
Like
Okay.
they create a part of creation, or they created the land, or the land is a god. But God's
They
saying
rose up from
everything
it,
that
yeah.
exists, I created.
Yeah.
Everything that can be known, I know. I've searched the depths. I control the depths.
Yeah.
Like
There's also a big idea of God can't be conquered.
yeah,
With even the story of Jezebel and Elijah.
and it's this constant like he's constantly presenting how much greater he is than anything.
Yeah.
No one before me. No, like the whole Job narrative at the end where he's just like, hey, all of these things, also this great enemy that other religions count as equally opposite to a god or is a god.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just something I made on a Tuesday.
Well,
Like,
can't we see some of this slipping into when we think about okay, so maybe this is too much of a tangent, but when we think about God and Satan as direct rivals, as if they're
Right, as if they
competing
have
with each
equal
other.
power.
So that would be something from Zoroastrianism where there is a
Yes.
good and evil, and like there's two wolves kind of a thing.
yeah,
right?
dualism.
Dualism.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just feel like that would be the modern equivalent of
this,
of
like,
this,
of the idea that there's
believing there's something equal to God.
to God, but however, it's just slightly lower.
Right.
Yeah, I guess if someone didn't know their stuff very well, yeah.
There's a book I'm meaning to read.
Or if you're a Mormon.
Interesting, but that there's a lot. The dualism is rising in Christianity.
Yeah.
A lot, especially with like philosophers. This idea that it's good versus evil, that God is good versus the evil, and like the evil is opposite of Him, equally so.
Yeah.
Where God is saying like, no, I'm
Yeah.
above this whole mess.
Yeah.
Everything is below me.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost like part of the Gospels is that.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe Jesus is king or something.
It's almost like he's above death and above every sin that could possibly be thrown at him.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
It's almost
and that
like
gets into
Matthew
Christus
talks about
Victor. Is
Victor, man.
It's almost like
Atonement theory.
Matthew actually ends with all authority under heaven and earth has been given unto me. Therefore, go commission,
that. Yep.
yeah.
and I will always be with you even to the end of the age.
Yeah.
Because he's everywhere. Yeah.
Because he's not
But that's-
henotheistic. Yeah.
That's Matthew, and that's I guess our first online question. If you have your own questions, leave them down in the comments section. I'm looking forward to hearing Colton's
Can't wait.
stuff
Talk
on
about
Luke.
Luke.
It's going to be great. Highly encourage you to hear that episode and Josh's previous stuff on Mark. Mark.
You know, actually,
Yeah.
before you told me that I was doing Luke, I thought there was only 3 Gospels, so I can't wait to read it.
Oh, it'll be great, won't it?
We're gonna get a really good take.
Also, guys, it'd be really great to hear in comments, even if you're like we don't got very many people at this point. But just like if you could write stuff in the comments, that would feed our ego, and then we would be able to respond to you guys in our like segment, and then you guys can be a part of the podcast.
Oh my God.
That is actually kind of our whole idea. Like
Yeah.
on our website, our whole quote unquote mission statement is we just want to create an online community where we incorporate people into the fun
Absolutely.
conversations that we have.
Yeah.
Good conversations about God.
It's awesome.
To learn and to discuss, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to welcome him, or I'd like to welcome you at the beginning.
Welcome to the beginning.
We're
of the
starting it now. I'd like to thank everyone for getting this far, and we'll see you next week.